Mr. Carlos Perez. Might not be a lowrider legend, but I think a Chicano legend, nonetheless, an amazing artist. And I'll let you introduce yourself.
Thank you, Rick. Is this on, or should I speak through this one? Yeah, I guess so. Where do we start? I guess we start. I was born in Mexico City. Grew up in Jalisco, in El Chante, Jalisco, which is a small town. I don't know how much time I got, but I'm going to try to keep it short and just big blocks, okay? So by 1957, or thereabouts, 57, 58 time frame, my mom decided to move us from El Chante, Jalisco to Tijuana because she had a dream, and the dream was to bring her two kids to get an education here in the U.S. And so we followed her wherever she went, wherever she wanted us to go. And so she got us here. She got us here without having to, put ourselves in any bad situation. She worked very hard, and she got all the documentation that was necessary to formally allow us into the country because we're Mexican citizens. I was born in Mexico City, as I say. My life has always been one of a lot of faith. Not necessarily just faith in our Creator, but also in the raza, our gente, our people. And so for me, it's been a trek that combined with my upbringing, with my aunts and my uncles and my grandmother, kind of nurtured for me to be here today. We ended up in 1957 driving from El Chante, Jalisco to Tijuana by bus, but first we had to go from El Chante, Jalisco to Guadalajara by taxi cab. And the taxi cab guy that shows up, it was classic lowrider, early 1957 time frame. This guy's car was decked out, and both on the interior, he had all the dingle balls and the dice that we put on our rear view mirror, and all these different symbolisms. He had a little altar in there, and it was all red and white tuck and roll seats, diamond tuck and roll seats. I mean, they were beautiful, man. And I was like, wow, what did my mom do? Did she order this specially or something? I thought maybe, because this was very fancy for the time frame, right? I was used to like second transportation, de la segunda, right? Or tercera sometimes. But in any case, we get into this cab, and it is like just really decked out, and both on the inside and the outside. And like I said, he had a little altar there, but the way that he drove was so cool because, he had a stick shift on the column, okay? And some of you guys know what that means. But anyway, every time he would shift, he would like grab the stick shift like this, and he would go. Así. I mean, literally, just like letting it go, just acting cool. And he would just sit back and he was so cool. And so that was my first experience that I think that it really resonates to me now more than ever. Because I've grown to understand so much about our culture, right? We were kind of born into it to a big degree, as Mexicanos, right? We're born into iconographies that relate to things like Dia de los Muertos, right? Things like, like I did a piece recently for honoring those that died during the pandemic. But these are all symbolisms, right? The flowers are all part of our culture. The skeletons are all part of our culture. We accept life as much as we accept death, and we're not afraid of it. And it tries to get us, but we're not afraid of it. Un diablito. It's a paper.
I want to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah,
Before I do that.
Yeah, but let me just finish this one last story. So we get to Tijuana, and in Tijuana, I have to walk about a mile to school. And I had to walk by a couple of churches, both a Jewish church, I also happen to be Jewish, and a Catholic church. I also happen to be Catholic. So those were the pleasant moments. And then there were some areas of the turf that was a little bit sort of shady. And there were a lot of cabarets and stuff like that. People were asking you to come on down to the cabaret there in Tijuana. So it was a very different environment than living in El Chante, Jalisco with my family. But then there was these talleres, right? These workshops where the mechanics would work on their cars. Or you bring in your car and they work on it. And guess what? A lot of those talleres were tuck and roll, diamond roll type of services that they provided there for people that wanted to bring their cars from San Diego or even from LA all the way to Tijuana to get your tuck and roll done there. And so it was really cool to see all the displays that they had to show the people, the different types of tuck and roll and diamond shapes and, linear stuff. And I mean, really, really fancy stuff that they did. And again, that was another brush for me with the lowrider culture that exists, that has now become what it is today, and is going to continue to evolve.
Right. I just want everybody to give him a round of applause because we're sitting here right now with the artist that illustrated the Apple logo, and he's given us his time to give us his perspective on Chicano culture and lowrider art. So talking about the iconography, right, that you were holding up there, you mentioned to me a couple months ago that you were heavily influenced by the I Am Joaquin poem by Portugal Gonzalez, which it's heavily iconographic, right? Symbolism, messages all throughout that poem. How do you see that is almost a correlation to lowrider and that being part of the Chicano identity?
Repeat the question one more time.
So how is lowriding seminal to the Chicano identity?
Well, it's a blending of many different things. Obviously, is part Mexican, it's part Mexican American, it's part indigenous. Our Aztec roots. And actually, our roots really are defined as Mexicanos as the Olmecs being the oldest civilization in the Western Hemisphere. And that is our root as Mexicanos, is the Olmecs. So we know much about the Olmecs, their language, their iconography, very heavy in iconography, and numerical systems and so forth in their writing. So they had a very higher level sort of understanding of education, of knowledge, of the things that we needed to know as human beings. And that was very important. And that's the root that we come from. So there's no shame in that, as far as I'm concerned. On top of that, we're the oldest civilization on the Western Hemisphere. That's part of my life. That's part of my lifeline of who I am, tracing my bloodline back to the Olmecs. I was born in Mexico City. I'm Mexica. But I'm also Jewish, of all things, right? I'm also Jewish, and I talked a little bit about my mom's family on my dad's side was Jewish, and he came from the Pyrenees in Spain, and but on my father's side they were Mexica. Predominantly, they live very, very close to Teotihuacan, as a matter of fact. My trek started there, right? It started in Mexico City. I was actually lost for 48 hours when I was 2 years old down in Mexico City, okay? My mom was besides herself, and of course, being Mexican Catholic, she gave I guess, part of her soul, part of her moment, her life, to the Virgen de Guadalupe, if they would find me. Of course, I don't know what she would have done if they didn't find me, but they did. But that's the way that my life sort of got started, right? Then we trekked in 1959, 1960. After we had lived in Tijuana for a couple of years, we trekked up to Stockton, California. My mom finally got the paperwork. We had our green cards, and I think it said alien card on there, which was kind of interesting. I go, I kind of like being an alien. I'm not from here anyway. We're from the stars, right? And so, but anyway, I made it up to Stockton. I grew up in a little neighborhood there in downtown Stockton. My mom was working as a cook down the street, and I was just learning, trying to figure out what this language was that I was hearing, because it all sounded like Charlie Brown speaking to the adults. Wah, 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 wah. It sounded just like that. I go, Mom, I cannot live here. You have to send me back to Tijuana. And so she did. She sent me back to spend another 2 years with my aunt Pachita that lived there. And in the meantime, my brother and her were up here making way for me to come back. And eventually I came back in 1960, thereabouts. And so from Stockton, it gave me a moment to sort of, we were coming from a tiny little town, El Chante, Jalisco, and there was like 800 inhabitants at the time. And so now, I showed up in Stockton in 1960, and it was like a metropolis. Downtowns in California in the 1960s, they were humming. There was a lot of early lowrider vehicles out there too, right? They were coming over from the 30s and into the 40s and 50s, and everything in between. Even
the Chicano movement starts picking up in the 60s.
Yeah. And so in 1968, one of my art teachers says to me, Carlos, how would you like to come and volunteer this weekend? And I go, for what? He goes, well, we're going to be doing some silk screening. And I go, well, what's that? And so then he explained what the process was. And I said, okay, that sounds cool. Let's go check it out. So we go down there to this warehouse on a Saturday morning. And what are they doing? They're silk screening the placards for Cesar Chavez in 1968 made a trek from Delano to Sacramento. I knew nothing about Cesar Chavez at the moment, until I got a chance to start silk screening some signs, and then I began to ask my tocayo, Carlos Lopez, who actually taught me how to silk screen, and he also began to tell me the history of what this was all about the Chicano movement and stuff like that. So yeah, Corky Gonzalez was an early pioneer of the Chicano movement. He did the People's March out of Denver Colorado. My wife is from Denver, Colorado. She's right up here. She'll vouch to that. In fact, she knew Corky's group. She knew of them. Her mom had told them to stay away from there. But in any case, that was just a slight warning. She didn't listen to them, and she continued to hang out there. But yeah, Corky Gonzalez, I think, is very important to the movement and the development of the Chicano movement, because he wrote a poem called "I Am Joaquin," and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get to it because something is not sort of loading up here. Let me try again. In any case, Corky, we're looking at around 1965, thereabouts, when he began his crusade for justice. And it was a student movement, basically, to bring us, if you will, to the understanding that we needed to seek out justice for equity in education. And that was very, very important to our survival in the long term, in the long haul. And of course, my mom, that's why my mom had brought us here. And so she had this dream as much as other people had the dream at the same time. Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta. Dolores Huerta was actually from Stockton and from the same neighborhood that I grew up in as a little kid there in Stockton. And then there's a little story about that, because about 7 years ago, I get a call from her niece, and her niece says to me, "Carlos, we would like to host an exhibition of your work here at the gallery in Stockton." And I said, "Oh, that sounds cool. In Stockton, I'll be going back to my hometown, to show them the placas that I now have acquired or gained, in my trek in life." And so it was nice that they were giving me that invitation. I came to find out later that Dolores Huerta in 1965, there around, lived 1 block away from me. She lived on San Joaquin Street, and we lived on Sutter and Market. But we both lived off of Market Street. Well, they went on to build a gallery there in that neighborhood. I had no idea of that gallery. They just simply invited me to come back to Stockton to see the gallery and see what I thought. Well, I showed up at the gallery, and I looked up and I go, I lived right across the street in 1965. From 1960 to 1967, I lived right across the street from what now used to be a clothing store for workmen's clothes. That's where we would buy our Friscos and our working shirts, because that's the way we dress, right? We dressed that early pioneers of the Chicano movement was also how you dressed. And so forth. So that was also part of the development of the iconography of who we are today. Yeah, and many people still wear the attire, so to speak. But in any case, here I had made a 45-year big circle into Silicon Valley, and then get invited back to Stockton, to the neighborhood where I came into in the U.S., and now I was exhibiting a 45-year retrospective of my work, which included the Apple logo as one of the drawings that I had drawn in my career.
So you mentioned something really interesting about using I Am Joaquin as a teaching tool. How do you think that low writing can be used as a teaching tool?
Well, for one, the mechanics and the ingenuity and the beauty, it's all sort of wrapped up in those cars. I mean, to be able to have a car bounce around and do all these, things, I mean, that takes ingenuity. I mean, that's probably as much as building a pyramid as building a car. You know what I mean? And the same kind of mentality that's gone into building the pyramids has gone into building a car. because they do function. They're for a reason, not only artistic reason, but a mechanical reason, hydraulic issues. You have there's a lot of science in there, wrapped up in there, you know, and so those that have come up with the ideas and the methodologies for the hydraulics and the paint jobs, and I mean, you name it, right? The everything on the interior. It takes genius people to do that kind of stuff, you know. Now to the point where that movement is now being emulated by people in Japan. In Japan, they have a whole culture that's now a lowrider culture, and seeks to even emulate us in the way we speak and the way that we tattoo ourselves, the whole ball of wax.
Yeah.
Right?
How do you feel about that? How do you feel about that?
I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
I mean, we're on a pretty good trajectory. Is that right?
Trajectory?
Thank you. That's a tough word for me to get out. But yeah, I mean, you know, that's an amazing, I think that's an amazing direction, because, I mean, you know, we're cosmic in origin anyway, right? I mean, we call ourselves La Raza Cósmica for a reason, you know? So for me, it's really truly is about living that way, you know, as much as you can. You know, life is sometimes challenging, no doubt, especially here in the Silicon Valley where it's so expensive, and you know, it's like, oh, you know, how you make it every month. But you know, being an artist it's all right. I mean, you know, I get a lot of jobs, and maybe that's what keeps me alive. But it's very challenging. And so for those that can sort of step away from that mentality and build sort of their own sort of world based on their culture and based on their ideas, lowriding, while it may have some hints of maybe Baroque-ness.
Mm-hmm. Can you describe that? Can you explain that with
yeah.
Baroque?
Well, but Baroque is actually, you know, and it's understandable, right? Because it comes through the church. It's the relationship of Mexicanos that they had with the church. The church was very Baroque in the way it presented the mass or even the iconography. And today we write a lot in Old English, right? We write a lot in Old English. Well, the Old English is a biblical, if you will, Bible script that is used, typographical script that is used in Bibles. And so, again, you know, that just adds to the knowledge, I have this thing that I quote: an idea can turn to dust or magic depending on those that rub against it. Okay? So, and that means no matter what you do, okay, if you rub against something, it's going to rub off on you. And then you're going to procreate that, and then the next generation is going to procreate that, and every single time that it makes a shift or a move in any direction, it's being edified. It's being edified. And I think that that's what's really very cool about the possibilities of what we can do with low-riding culture, art, technology, mechanics. I mean, it's the work. I know many artists that are actually lowriders, and then some of them may even be here today with their cars out here. And check out those cars. They're fantastic, and they have an enormous amount of knowledge that has gone into it. Hecho con raza, you know, knowledge and attitude and culture and the ball of wax,
Yeah.
right?
I think a lot of people overlook that part, that lowriding is so embedded in tradition, but it's not even tradition of our own raza, right? Like going into the typography of Old English. That's a whole nother tradition that was brought into our culture to beautify the work that we're creating. Right?
It's el mestizaje, right? We too at one time were conquered and had to assimilate to another another culture, another entity, and it wasn't pretty. You know, in a lot of ways it wasn't pretty, but we have survived, and that's one of the things I do remember this very last part of Corky Gonzalez's poem. He says, "I shall survive. I will survive," and when he says, "I will," you can't fight against the will, right? It's going to happen. It happens. It happens, and it happens every single day that we exist in this life, and we nurture our lives with other people. We now are mestizos ourselves, so you know we understand, right? We have to understand, because if we don't, then we're doomed to repeat the same things, right? The bad stuff, and so that I think is. Good words, wisdom coming from El Maestro Corky Gonzalez. Yeah. That poem, if you've never read I Am Joaquin, please do so. I Am Joaquin by Corky Gonzalez.
Yeah, that's interesting you bring that up, because the perseverance of the lowrider culture from its early beginnings, right, having to deal with the adversity of whether it be racism or unjust treatment by police officers or the laws that are put in place, we're still here, right? We're still here 40, 50, 60 years later. But I think that comes from the determination of the Chicano will, right? Because we know that lowriding has its roots in Chicano culture, but we accept everybody into the culture.
Right.
And that's what makes it beautiful, makes it a
right.
rainbow of lowriding, right?
Right, yeah, because I mean, well, when you think about it, back in the early, in the 40s and 50s, Mexicanos or Chicanos from LA and from East San Jose, who were our neighbors, well, the African American, the black experience was also our neighbors, and so were the Asian relationships that we had with the Filipinos. And we still have today. I mean, Cesar Chavez and the movement of Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers was founded by a Filipino by the name of Larry Idleon, 1965. He mobilized the field workers, predominantly Filipino, and perhaps a few Japanese and maybe even some Chinese workers at the time, out of Stockton. In fact, Larry Idleon lived in my neighborhood in Stockton. We lived in Corona Park, and he lived after he retired from the union. He lived in my neighborhood. So I've always been sort of around, rubbing myself, if you will, around those things that were happening or continuing to happen in our midst, right? And then coming here to the Bay Area for me was another sort of experience altogether. I came here to go to school. My mom wanted to, I became the first one to go to higher education and to go beyond junior college. And so I made it to San Jose State. I got accepted there as both in the fine art department as well as in the graphic design program. And then in 1974, I completed the design program, and the faculty named my portfolio one of the top 3 portfolios of the class. That gave me an invitation it's an organization called the Western Art Directors Club, and they gave us the funding, or they matched the funding with the employer that picked up our portfolio. My portfolio was picked up by Regis McKenna, who became the first agency of record for Apple Computers Inc. in 1975. 76 time frame, we started working on the project for Apple. And so, but it came with all this information, right? And so when I was asked to do that, I had not only the tools. Back in those days, we were still using, compasses and wet mediums to be able to do illustration work and all that. And that's what I was hired predominantly at the agency to do, was to illustrate stuff. I was the one that could, and I could do it better than anybody else. And I can still probably do it better than anybody else.
That's Chicano power right there.
But no. And with all due respect to my artist brothers and sisters, I do try to be good at what I do, and that's one of the very first things that I teach young kids, because I teach young kids the philosophy that I have about art, and about life, and about how you're going to make the bills, how you're going to pay the bills and stuff. And it's not easy. It's a challenge, right? To juggle all these things. And I've been a working artist, self-employed since 1980. So I've seen the ups and downs of here in San Jose. But the iconography of the apple, as much as it is powerful and it is a universal, image today, so is an Aztec image. So is an Olmec image. So is a Chicano image. Yeah, I mean, look, you on the flyer that you put up, you said, what do these things have in common? Mm-hmm. They have a thread in common, right? They have a thread in common, and we're always laying down thread, right? We're always laying down, stitching it together, seeing it through, making sure that we sort of like coexist, if you will. I see a lot of great talent in Chicano. The artists like Yolanda Lopez, if you haven't seen her exhibit, it's at the Mexican Heritage Plaza. One of her icons of her life was the Virgen de Guadalupe, but not necessarily the Virgen de Guadalupe as a religious figure or icon, but really more as an icon for the feminine that she represents. She represents life, right? And the Aztecs also had Tonatzin. Tonatzin was actually the venerated feminine goddess of the Aztec people. And so it was natural for Juan Diego to bring that thing together. Why? Because he needed to stop the violence that was persecuting and killing his people. And so he chose to use that image to venerate the feminine aspects, the healing aspects of the blood of our existence. And thank God, thank Juan Diego, thank Tonatzin, that they were used as instruments to turn off the violence. And so wherever we can find ways to turn off the violence, we need to do that, even in our society today, right? I mean, a lot of our young people end up getting in violence and gangs and stuff like that. And I have nothing against organizations that want to meet and get together, and they're gente, they're a group, they have a belonging. But like Cesar Chavez said, keep it peaceful.
I have more questions here, but I do want to open it up to the audience and give you an opportunity to ask your questions to Mr. Carlos here, whether it's lowrider related or not, preferably lowrider related, but anybody has any questions that they would like to ask?
I have a question.
Yeah, over here.
Unfortunately, it's not lowrider related, but we can get to that.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your take on your journey to the Regis McKenna agency, what it was like. Like, what first of all gave you the ghana to apply for that role? And then what was it like working at that agency in those early days, being probably the only Latino in space? Just what was it like in those early days?
So 1974, I get that honor. I was both a dean scholar, because I had straight A's in all the classes that I took at San Jose State. So I was a dean scholar, and then they also gave me the honor of being one of the top three. There was no 1, 2, or 3. There's just one of the top three, and those portfolios were then handed to the organization, the Western Art Directors Club. They then took that portfolio and invited agencies to come and see the portfolios at some location. I think it was at the Peninsula Art Center in Palo Alto, I think it is where they would have their meetups there. And Regis McKenna, Hall Kelly was his name. He was the senior art director of Regis McKenna at the time. He went to that meeting, and he saw my portfolio, and he liked it. And he liked it because I had the ability to be able to photograph, to illustrate, and to design, and to use typography effectively, and things like that, right? All the things that an art director should look for in looking for talent. And so he invited. So I didn't have to go look for the job. The job came to me, but the good thing, what I brought to it, is that I was equipped and I was ready, and I had the momentum to be challenged by it, right? So I was not afraid. It was a big step, no doubt about that. And basically it was like, damn, it's like I was just in Tijuana in 1958, right? 59, 60, and now in 1974, I'm walking into Regis McKenna agency in Palo Alto. Right? It was like that. That's the scope, right? So I get there, Regis had just gone from being just an ad agency and a PR agency to becoming also the first agency that actually developed an internal department for marketing communications. And guess what? I was the first one that they hired. And there was the senior manager of the department was Dave Takigawa, Japanese, that actually was a PR guy that had worked for National Semiconductor with Regis McKenna when they were working in the department of marketing communications for National Semiconductor. That's where Regis came from. He came from that, and he saw during that time in the 70s, early time, because the embedded circuitry was just beginning to happen. It was just beginning to happen. NASA has solved the issue that they were having with their transistors blowing out in re-entry and getting too cold and frozen out in space. And so they had to figure out a way. Finally, sometime around that time frame, a group that eventually became an entity here in the Valley, but it was a whole conglomerate of knowledge and people from back east that had come from Ivy schools and stuff like that, and they brought these people together, and they figured out how to embed the circuitry into something stable like silicon. And silicon keeps everything cool, and it keeps it from overheating, and so forth. So perfect element to embed the circuitry into it. And of course, Janov was, I'm sorry, not Janov, I'm talking about the two Apple guys, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. They were right at the cusp of that, right? They were one of the early pioneers of actually taking some of that embedded circuitry and putting it into their system so that it could begin to do, the first Apple II is the one that I was working on. Our assignment at Regis McKenna was to launch the Apple II products and to launch the company as a company in technology. So the two products was a desktop, a transportable unit that can go into your backpack and you can throw it over your shoulders. I think you have the cover of the magazine. We used that. We used the hop sack of taking your books, kind of thing. Here you could take your computer with you, kind of attitude thinking. And that was the whole idea, is to make it mobile, make it transportable, to the point now that we have this. And more importantly, we now even have this, right? We now even have a watch, which reminds me of my time in Stockton, because I always thought of being Dick Tracy as a little kid. And one of the toys that I used to play with was that little walkie-talkie that he would talk into to connect with the troops. But anyway, to completely answer your question, I really enjoyed it because I was getting a chance to right away. Hawk Kelly knew of my talent, and he knew that I was very versatile. So he would say, "Hey, here, go take some snapshots of this, and let's create a comp of that." Okay, and so I would go into the white room. We had a little white area where we could set up things, and we can photograph them and shoot them, and then begin to sort of make sense of them, right, in some way. So he began to utilize my talent that I had, and so he gave me carte blanche. Basically, Carlos, do whatever comes to mind, just do it. So a lot of the little tinkering ideas and stuff like that came from, just what you wanted to see, what you thought that might be cool, or the things that you might have seen around you. In 1970, in the 70s, it was the hippie time of our growing up. My hair was long. Everybody's hair was long. So was Steve Jobs' hair was long. Guy. He had a very interesting personality because he eventually became something very different, but from what he started. But it was an evolution, right? Just like to some degree, you can say that the logo has been an evolution as well. It went from being this, which is appropriate for 1970 or the 70s, because we were coming out of advertising being in black and white, into now the 70s advertising being in color. And one of the things that they wanted to do in the original logo is, how do we convey the idea of that we have color array in our system now, right? You know what that means. It means that you have a bus that's bringing in video and it's bringing in audio, and it's carrying a lot of high-techy stuff, right? All into one thing. A lot of people always ask me about the byte. The byte is bit. Think about it in terms of bit. It's a bit. This is the bit of that. This is the bit of that. That was the mentality. And that's where it connects to technology in the word byte. But B-Y-T-E, right? Not the traditional byte. Does that answer the question?
100%.
Yeah.
anyone else have another question?
Can I see you hold that picture again?
Which one?
That one, the apple.
Yeah.
What would your self, as you are now, say to the younger self that you were then? Advice you would give them?
Well, I think for one, the logo has been handled very well in its evolution. Its evolution now are very minor, small differences that I don't know, maybe some of you guys might know what they are, but there has been some edits to this. One of the things that when you're dealing with the circle, and if you're trying to make it an icon, you have to stop it from spinning because it's a circle. How do you stop it from spinning? Well, you put a chunk like this in there, you put a leaf up here, and you put this tuck down here at the bottom. It allows it to sit rather than turn, okay? So it sits. And so to answer particularly your question, give it to me one more time.
The advice that you would give your younger self. Now
Ah,
that you are.
okay. So the evolution that has taken place because Apple trusts who they're putting that logo into whose hands. They're very well equipped as much as I was when we did this. And by the way, I should mention that I did not design the logo. That honor goes to Rob Janoff. Rob Janoff was the art director that basically was giving, the other thing, that Regis did very early on in the advertising world there in Palo Alto is that he began to create team mentality, right? Just like today's high-tech companies all work on team technology or team people. They're bringing people together, bringing the best minds together that can do the job. And so I was chosen as the illustrator. Rob Jana was chosen to conceptualize it, which he conceptualized this little thing on basically a napkin that was a little what we call a thumbnail sketch. And that thumbnail sketch was shown to Rob Janoff. Rob Janoff. He and I and Tom Kamafuji, we ended up showing it to Steve Jobs. Steve Jobs, that was just one of maybe about 6 that we had narrowed it down to by that time. And he chose that little thumbnail. He goes, I like that. That's cool. And so then they handed it to me. Here, Carlos, go develop it from there to here. And so a lot of me is in here. Between the thumbnail sketch, which is just a thumbnail sketch, the color bars weren't even these colors. These colors were chosen by Tom Kamafuji, who at the time was doing these beautiful color masks, Japanese masks. And they had these beautiful stripes, of color. It was just beautiful. And the way he worked with color was very beautiful as well. And he organized this palette, and this is the palette that was used in the first iteration of the logo. The second iteration of the logo got rid of the stripes, still kept the shape, but now only used in black and white on many, many different things. More recently, they've added like I call a little swoosh, like the other swoosh, that we know about, the other logo that has a swoosh. Well, it now has a little bit of a swoosh in here that goes like this. It just basically just sits in there nicely. And now it's mainly used in silver, black, white, and that's pretty much it. Every once in a while they'll play around with the color of it and stuff like that. And then more recently, I saw a version come out of, it came out of India, Ay, ay, ay. It's like, okay. We're gonna, I think they're going to have to put a break on it because that went a little bit too far. It still kept the shape, though. The good thing is that the shape is really what says Apple, right? And so that's never going to change.
Do one more question before we have to wrap up here. Yeah.
Would either of you address cars as medium for art? So you could do painting on a pendant, you can do it on a coffee cup, you can do it on hanging on a wall, an interior wall, an exterior wall, all those things. Some of them are just places to put the art, but some of them incorporate in their theme the context, like a mural on the outside of a building. Mm-hmm. So cars, specifically lowrider, how much does the shape of the car or the function of the car as a vehicle, how much does that influence the art?
I think it actually goes both ways. I think that the creator is thinking about the overall presentation and its capacity and ability and all of that, okay? And I think where they're woven together is that it's all about the Chicano sensitivities, right? It's like, do I put this kind of flair on it? Or do I put that kind of flair on it? Do I put this kind of pinstripes? Or what kind of iconography am I going to put on it? Am I going to put on my girlfriend, portrait of my wife, portrait of the Virgen de Guadalupe? You know what I mean? So I think the beauty I think about it is that individually, it's very individual, right? It's the makeup of that one person, and that person brings along his own or its own, her own experience to it, and along with the technology and the knowledge that we have. I mean, a lot of stuff that's, for instance, customized now these days, it's digitally produced. You have to produce a piece of art, or some kind of model or something that they can then do like a three-dimensional thing. I mean, some of them even have, as much as, reflective a mirror sort of stuff where if you look at it this way, it's a different image than when you look at it this way kind of thing, right? But all that kind of stuff is being generated and created and thought of and put into this is my identity. This is who I am, right? Kind of thing. And I'm putting it out there. And on top of that, it has 4 wheels. So if I want, I can take it anywhere and park it somewhere, and it's my gallery right there, right? I can take it anywhere I want and show it to people.
Yeah, I've heard of lowriders be referenced in 2 ways that I really love. One is the lowriders are mobile canvases where the artist sits in the driver's seat. So going along with being able to take your gallery wherever you want to take it. And the other one is that lowriders are transit tattoos. So they also are beautifying the city and the streets and the boulevards, right? They're ways of marking up these things that are structured and built by cities and by engineers. And you have these beautiful pieces of artwork that they're like the tattoos of the city. Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Paul Slocum from Barrio Horseshoe. First of all, thank you for conducting this forum so that our community and that our culture can bridge that gap of understanding and comprehension and sensitivity. I believe that elements of compassion and understanding and appreciation can evolve from that, from the artwork itself. Now, I understand the lowrider meaning 2 things, the person and the car. It's not just the car, it's the person as well. And so we have to understand that within the context of art because of the clothing, the way that he looked. And so with that said, I understand lowrider being the artistic and creative expression of the sons and daughters of campesinos. So how much would you agree that it is a political statement, that what we are doing is claiming space that we have been deprived of, because the history of California is that the United States had declared war against the Mexican. And so that means our land was taken. How much do you agree that the artistic expression viewed through the lowrider car and his creativity is claiming space, the reclamation of California and its space? How much of that would you agree?
I totally agree, 100%. Aztlan, right? Aztlan is basically the Southwest. That's the land that was taken by force, by a war, towards Mexico, and basically with their hands behind their back and twisting them, they sold it so that they could at least have peace, right? But you can take that away, but you know what? The heart and the spirit and that's there, you'll never be able to take that away. That's there. We're examples of that. Those are of us that are here that have Latino roots, Hispanic roots, Chicano roots, like Corky Gonzalez says, Mexicano roots, whatever you want to call me. You know, I am that. I am that. But I'll stand up with it, and I'll be respectful with it, and like you said, you know, to honor and respect not only who we are, but also to the rest of the world, that they may have also honor and respect for us. Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being here, for sharing your time with us, for
My pleasure.
enjoying this beautiful space and venue that we've been able to create together, and just props again for, you know, being who you are. Thank you.
Hey.
Oh, all right. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
At 2:30, we're going to be back here with, yeah, there you go.
Oh,
Yes, sir.
man.
I love it. With Mario Madrid, the son of Sonny Madrid, the founder of Lowrider Magazine.
Yeah.
And we'll get into, you know, conversations about how that magazine came about, the context of when it was created, and much more. It'll be another hour-long conversation, and we'll open it up to the audience. So bring your friends back. You know what I mean? We'll try and fill this up again. And thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day.